I'll repeat that one more time. Architects should be afraid. You won't need to be afraid if you embrace this stuff. But if you deny it's real, I mean, I've got my team creating renderings of buildings in 30 seconds. And when I say replace the brick with the glass, it's another 30 seconds.
Welcome to another episode of Tools, Talents, and Techniques. And today I have somebody who is right at that convergence of real estate and technology. I am ecstatic to welcome to the show Mr. Jim Young. Jim, welcome.
Dustin, great to be here. Really excited to see a younger generation embracing real estate technology and willing to dig into the details to figure it out. So pleasure to be here.
I'm flattered that you call me the younger generation because I feel like I'm getting older by the second here.
Well, it's all relative.
It's all relative. That's right. So when you first came to my attention, first I was like, how have I not heard of you before? Because you have been involved for decades on many of the things that I love to think about, talk about, work in. And could you just briefly tell our audience a little bit about who you are and your background, but just brief, because I'm gonna go into the deeper questions.
Sure. The short version is I came out of the tech industry. So I was dealing with Fortune 250 companies and pretty sophisticated technology systems, big networks, lots of workstations and printers. So I cut my teeth, with some pretty sophisticated stuff. I always wanted to be in real estate. And one day I just woke up and said, I want to take what I've learned in the technology industry, which was very sophisticated for the time, and apply it to an industry that was basically doing, multi-million-dollar deals with stones and chisels. And I said, how can you conduct business with these major assets using such primitive tools? And, so I jumped out of the tech industry, started a little consulting company called the Jameson Group. That evolved into two companies, one Realcomm, which is still going on today. The other is RE Applications, which in 1999, we created a cloud software platform. It wasn't called cloud at the time. It was called ASP. We eventually sold that to LoopNet, which got bought by CoStar, and the product was just mothballed, I think, about 4 or 5 months ago. So, whenever I told everybody I was going to, build a enterprise platform based on the internet, they thought it was crazy. And here we are, 21 years later or whatever, that not so much.
So when you first made the leap you had the tech background, and what year? This is in the early 90s?
Yeah. So that was probably, I started in tech in the mid 80s. And then by early 90s, I think I'm thinking about, or actually, I take that back. Started tech in the early 80s. And then by 90, I'm working for Sperry Van Ness. Went in, and was going to be a real estate guy, but then just kept getting pulled back to the technology. And I was doing things in the corner of their La Jolla office that, they were all just jumping on phones, making calls, and I'm analyzing data. And one day I walked into the office of Mark Van Ness and Rand Sperry. I said, the market's about to collapse. And they said, who are you? And, why are you talking such crazy things? And I said,
how'd you get in here?
How'd you get in here? Yeah. And I said, I'm new to the industry. I'm a data tech guy, but I've been analyzing data. And I threw the graph on the desk, and Mark looked at it pretty astutely, and he goes, come back in a month. So I came back in a month, and the graph just shot straight up, and he goes, this is really going to happen, is it? I said, yeah, it is. So he pulled me out of the brokerage bullpen and put me into the Chief Information Technology Officer position. I designed some systems that took notice of default data from the county recorder, plugged them through our system, and then we literally had leads on brokers' desks within 24 hours of the notice of default being posted at the county recorder, cleaned up. I mean, it was like shooting fish in a barrel, made them hundreds of millions of dollars. And then ultimately, some of the early thinkings of my system is what they used to be one of the lead managers of all the Resolution Trust Corporation, RTC's assets. So that was really my cutting of my teeth. And I just got into the industry, but boy, did it have a big impact.
And when you were seeing all the things that people, you mentioned the stone and chisel, and what were the things that people were using then? And I know you mentioned the data applications. Like what type of systems were you building? Could you go into a little more detail on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, when I started, one of my first roles was to teach people about email. Okay. No, yeah, and all the brokers, well, I don't need to use this. Who else has got an email address? This is crazy. And so I had a bunch of guys that were just totally against it. And I said, okay, I'm not fighting this battle. So I found the young guys, who were interested in differentiating themselves. And all of a sudden they start showing up on the Achiever Trip stage every year. And they're like, how'd you guys get here? You just started. And I'll never forget, one of the most stubborn brokers comes up to me, finally says, all right, I'm yours. Show me your tech stuff, and I'm literally big fat fingers. I'm showing them how to use a laptop. So what we did was we got laptops, and all the brokers were quasi required to buy laptops, created a network for 4 offices, started using email, bought an image, built an image database, started using comp data in ways they had never used before. And then, like I said, once the market started going south, I smelled that something bad was happening, looked at the data, and then put together this distressed asset database, which really put them on the map.
So what year did you start the Realcomm conference group? Or was it just the conference first before the group?
Yeah, so left Sperry, I think in the 90, 91 timeframe, started the little consulting company called the Jameson Group. And we went into real estate companies and basically did for them what I did for Sperry. I built a little team of about 6, 8 people. And then by 1998, we're thinking, okay, you go, consulting is hard. You got to find new customers. And, even though you come up with the right answers, they always don't want to implement them. What else can we do? So I said, okay, let's start a software company, because we saw the customers' problems. Nobody had a centralized database in these brokerage companies. They were all, Excel spreadsheets, and everybody was taking photos and putting them in their top drawer. So from those consulting learnings, we said, okay, the industry needs an enterprise web-based, cloud-based solution. That was REApps, and it did commissions and listings and project management, contact management, way before people knew what Salesforce was. But it was very specific to the real estate industry. And then we started Realcomm. Kind of tested it out in '98 with SIOR, Society of Industrial and Office Realtors, in Chicago. And then next year we officially created the public event called Realcomm.
And so when you're seeing all of this evolution happening, and there's a lot of people that are just slow to adopt new technologies, new ways of doing things. Were there anybody else besides Sperry that was catching on quickly? Was there anybody that was like, yes, we see this, and
so the first thing we learned was we couldn't focus on the brokerage industry. Because of the brokerage model, independent contractors, selling cohesive organizational systems to a bunch of independent contractors really wasn't the way to go. And there's, maybe a dozen brokerage companies of size. But we did, so what we did, we created REApps, which worked at the enterprise level. We did sell to those bigger companies, and then the brokers joined onto those systems. But the other thing we were learning on the Realcomm side was that the brokerage industry was not willing to invest the dollars needed, like a Fortune 250 company invests in technology on a pretty regular basis. The brokerage companies weren't ready, willing, or able to do that consistently, right? They would have spurts of interest in tech, and then they would slow down. So we quickly pivoted to owners, operators, service providers, CBRE, JLLs, property management companies. And so by 2000, 2001, we were really focusing on the people who owned and operated the real estate. Brokers still came, but our focus was not 80% brokers anymore. It now shifted to the ownership model. Early days, the same suspects, JLL, CBRE. I remember the company out of Dallas. I can't recall their name. We gave Trammell Crow, we gave awards early days to companies like Trammell Crow for some innovations that they were doing in their office buildings. But it really was like we had to lift up every stone, every rock. It's not like we could put a message out there, come one, come all, innovative real estate companies. Now, what did happen during .com, same thing that happened in 2008, after 2008 and 2009, when the .com craziness was going on, the real estate industry jumped in full, right? And they said, we're going to make $1 million overnight. So, I think it was 2000, our exhibit floor filled up with 200 exhibitors out of nowhere, right? And so we thought, oh wow, we're really smart, we're really good. What we didn't realize at the time was we were just riding the .com wave. And you'd go around our exhibit floor and we'd say, so what do you guys do? He goes, well, do you know who's on our board? Well, what do you do? He goes, well, do you know we just raised $20 million? What do you do? What does your platform offer? Well, did I tell you we just raised $10 million? I knew we were in trouble in late 2000, leading into 2001, because I've been through enough cycles to smell that something was a bunch of hype and it was not going to end well. So by 2001, we were like, middle of 2001, after that event, I said, get ready. The crash is coming. Second time in my career, I called a crash, and lo and behold, .com, busted. And then the next, from 2001 to 2008, leading up to the next financial crash, we were going up slowly and steady. But after the crash of 08, 2009 started all over again. Millions, billions of dollars comes into PropTech and feeds all this hype. And unlike 2008, we're still drinking some of that Kool-Aid from 2008. Now, my prediction is it peaked in 2020. The PropTech hype phase peaked in 2020, and we've been feeling it every year since, right? Companies going out of business, being acquired, venture capitalists not willing to mark their portfolios to market, still claiming ridiculous valuations. But to answer your question, that was a long answer. For 27 years, getting truly innovative real estate companies who can innovate at scale, it's not easy. You have to lift up a lot of rocks, and talk to a lot of people. The Microsofts, the Googles, NVIDIA's in our community this year, bringing some real innovative stuff. But no, there's not an easy way to find those innovative people. Get rich quickers, shiny new object people, they're easy to find. Yeah. They were selling insurance last year, and this year they're selling PropTech. Who knows what they're going to be selling next year. But people who find the innovation, create the path to business models, know how to educate executive leaders, know how to find projects that get them to first base and then to second base instead of trying to hit a home run, correctly creating budgets to make sure management keeps giving you the money you need. Not an easy journey.
Yeah, and before I ask this next question, just to give context, and I know I told you this before, but maybe some of our listeners who haven't heard about my journey, coming from commercial real estate and being interested in tech and AI and all these things, when I left in commercial real estate and I joined a PropTech company a couple of years ago, I was going to all these different conferences, and some of the things that the exhibitors I would see, and it was like, oh, that's unique. That's cool. Oh, I see where this could add value, or this could save time, or this could save money. But for the most part, it was solutions without a problem.
Well, and then if you're, and I've talked to 1,000 of those companies, here's a question you need to ask. Okay, 2 questions. All right, cool app. So what's your enterprise strategy? The answer will be, what's an enterprise? Then your second question is, what's your cyber strategy? Their answer is, what's a cyber strategy? Okay. I mean, one-off applications, innovative ideas, I love them. I've worked with, the solution provider marketplace is where my heart lies. I started a software company, right? They're passionate. They're willing to innovate. They're willing to take risk, but they need to do a little homework on the industry. They need to understand what an enterprise is, all the different applications that a real estate organization is. A brokerage organization different than a property management, different than an asset manager, different than a corporate real estate department? The answer is yes. And if you just say, oh, I got this WYSIWYG that's going to work in any building, and you don't understand the business model, you'll last 36 months.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. Where they had something that worked for one, but didn't understand why the other industries or people, the other verticals in commercial real estate
and
or in real estate didn't want it. Maybe
this is because I'm getting a little older, but I'm a little discouraged by the lack of ethics in the marketing in our industry right now. I mean, when you have a product and you put a logo on your website saying this customer is using mine, I mean, we always had to get permission and make sure that they understood that we were putting it up there. I mean, we'll go up to some of these startups now, and all the big logos are up there, and little do we find it's one person in the Cleveland office that's using it, on a pilot. And then all of a sudden, they're representing that they're representing one of these major companies, and that just doesn't work. It catches up with you. You got to play by the rules. You got to have some ethical standards. But my biggest complaint is these technologists come into the industry. They solve one tiny little problem, to your point, but they don't understand the complexity of the fact that there could be 50 different applications sitting in a real estate organization that somehow have to tie together. I think I showed you a couple of the illustrations that we put together over the years. I mean, the roadmap, the technical application roadmap for a real estate company, the 10 different types of real estate companies is complex, and there's no getting around it, especially with cyber these days. I mean, that to me is one of the hottest topics we're dealing with, and it's not a fun battle to fight, and frankly, we're losing at this point. So, what I would say to the younger companies who go to these events and just have their WYSIWYGs out there, before you go, do your homework. Do your homework.
There you go.
If I walk up to your booth, I'm going to call you out.
Yeah, I love it. So, Jim, I actually, since you talked about that, I do want to talk about cyber, but I really, really want to make sure that we spend enough time talking about artificial intelligence and its impact in the industry. I mean, of course, we can talk about the world, but let's just keep it to the industry as much as possible. Sure. When did you first become aware of artificial intelligence?
So, as a technologist, it's not the same artificial intelligence that we talked about today. But in the mid 80s, when I was selling computers to law firms, the early stages of something conceptual, even similar to AI, was work product retrieval, litigation support systems. You would throw 10,000 documents into a system on a 75 megabyte hard drive, and then Battelle Basis would go in there and analyze every instance of the word Jim Young within 3 sentences of Dustin Sutton. Okay. So it wasn't AI, but it was using technology and systems. So that goes back, to mid 80s. But on the contemporary AI, I started really putting my ear to the ground probably 10 years ago, when these conversations of machine to machine were starting to come up. M to M, we called it. And it's, an early predecessor to AI. It's where you find patterns in technology, you create rules. If this happens 5 times, then do that. If the temperature in this conference room exceeds 80 degrees 5 times and there's no sensing of activity in the room, turn it off, right? So M to M was kind of the early stages, but the AI that we're living with today is a whole other enchilada. And I started really paying attention probably in the 2013, 2014 timeframe. Then I think it was in 2016, we actually had Cade Metz, and it might be 18. I'm trying to think what city we were in. I think that was in Nashville. Maybe Cade was in 2018. But in any event, this guy was a reporter, and he was in the room when Google's DeepMind was competing in the Korean Go Championship. And in the Korean Go Championship, or Go is a very complex Asian game. And these guys were going to, compete with AI against this world champion in this very complex game. And I believe, not 100% sure that the DeepMind guys beat them 2 out of 3. Okay. And that just lit up the guys who were sitting in Silicon Valley in closed offices working on that nobody knew about. So I got to be friends with Cade. He kept me up to date. But like everybody else, I took it to the real estate industry, actually talked about it on our general session stage about 7 years ago. Nobody understood it, wanted to talk about it, so it fell off the radar screen. And then once ChatGPT was announced, we said, okay, it's back, it's ready for prime time. I've been through enough tech cycles to know, okay, it's ready for prime time. So we spun up, we quickly, that was, I think, 22, we quickly introduced AI into the Realcomm 2023 program. Then we spun up an AI event in Silicon Valley at the end of 23, and I called it a honeypot event. Just was interested to see who was leaning in, who was going to show up, who were the early adopters, and we found them. CBREs, JLLs, McKinsey, Deloitte, Ernst EY, all the regular sophisticated big companies, as well as a bunch of small real estate companies who were leaning into it. From there, we created an AI advisory group. We got about 30 to 50 people that we meet with monthly, and we rip through things that will give you a headache. So we're in deep in the deep seeks. We're in deep in the NVIDIA chipsets. But immediately we say, oh, what's this mean to the real estate industry? And so 25% of the conversation is what's happening in the general tech world. And then the 75% of the conversation is how does this apply to real estate? So that led to a big real estate program last year, 2024, or a big AI program last year. And this year, AI every day, all day. I'm on the phone with my 10 advisors who are a subset of the bigger advisory group. We're talking agentic AI. We're talking multimodal. We're talking virtual property managers sitting on walls, talking to you, answering questions, no humans involved. We're breakdown of the lease process, breakdown of the land acquisition process. I mean, these people are doing things that 98% of the real estate industry has no clue about. And we saw that firsthand. We won't mention where, but we saw that firsthand, both of us, how the real estate industry is not ready.
Yeah.
Not ready.
Yeah. And sometimes I do feel like even with just the tools that I use, and even, I go as far as even doing the podcast, the tools I use for scheduling, for that, like it's does so much and so many things. And when you apply the tools that I use on the real estate side, it feels sometimes like I'm flying a spaceship when other people are walking.
Well, once the building is built, and even during the design and construction process, I mean, some of the things that we're going to show at the conference on the design process, architects should be afraid. I'll repeat that one more time. Architects should be afraid. You won't need to be afraid if you embrace this stuff. But if you deny it's real, I mean, I've got my team creating renderings of buildings in 30 seconds. And when I say replace the brick with the glass, it's another 30 seconds. Mm-hmm. I've been involved in the real estate process enough to know that would take 2 to 4 weeks in a regular architectural design process. Okay. So you look at the architectural design, the construction process. Our keynote this year comes from the construction industry. He's using AI to totally rethink how he puts concrete in the ground and steel. And he is probably one of the best keynotes we've had in 27 years.
Wow.
But then once the building's up, what do? You start leasing it out. You start putting tenants in there. You start answering maintenance requests. You start collecting rent, paying bills. It's all data processes that involves people sitting at desks with spreadsheets, passing data from one to another. AI is going to totally redefine that process. And on our stages this year, we're going to introduce the concept of digital real estate employees. I need an HR person. I need a property manager. You don't hire a person anymore. You augment your human team with a digital person who's 110%, has 110% experience in the given process, engaging with tenants, paying bills. And if everybody doesn't have a couple digital employees, which I know it sounds freaky, it scares the heck out of me. If you don't have a couple digital hires in the next 12 months, you're massively behind.
Wow. So you just ran through a lot of different things and where this is going to apply. Yeah. Do you, in your opinion, is there, I think you mentioned the architect, like that's a big one. Is there like a scale on where the most impact is going to be made with all these things? Like it's going to be this, then this, then this, but where should everybody be focusing first, if any?
Well, I mean, you really start breaking down the real estate process. Okay. I'm either going to buy an existing building or I'm going to build a new one. So let's say I want to build a new one. Go find an architect and you say, okay, I want to buy a new one. All right. What do you got in mind, Jim? All right. Well, let me charge you $25,000, bring in a couple of architects from the 80s, and we'll listen to you talk for a couple of days and we'll charge you $25,000 and then we'll give you a Word doc. Okay. And I said, that's not what I'm looking for. I want you to get out of my head what I'm thinking. I'm a visual learner. I want to see visual. Well, that process can now be replaced with somebody for 1/5, 6/10 the cost at 4, 5, 6, 7 times the speed. with more realistic representations that I may ever get from an architectural and design firm. So less money, faster, better. Okay, so that's the design process. I'll miss the construction process for a minute. Then you go into the real estate company and the way we process things. Like I said, collect the rent. It comes in electronically. It comes with a check. I scan it. Oh, let's use OCR. Some of the applications I've seen in the last 60 days are just upending everything we've ever known about a real estate process. So depending upon which aspect of the real estate industry you want to talk about, every process.
It's everything. Yeah. And one of those things, because I'm in the real estate business and I come from the operations side, and I feel like when I mentioned going to these conferences and seeing solutions to all the problem, I see all the problems. So it's easier for me to be like, oh, you know what, this could be done better. And I've been thinking about this for years. And then seeing those things
telling
is great.
All my friends, sipping on a glass of whiskey and asking a question I honestly want an answer to. And I'll tell you a story, then I'll ask you the question. So in 1992, actually beginning in 1989, on a trip in Switzerland, I was leaving the computer industry and getting ready to jump into the real estate industry. I typically didn't take long vacations, but I took a month sabbatical in between jobs. I said, I just want to chill as I'm leaving one industry and getting ready to go into another. Really got to that point of relaxation where your brain can start getting creative and it's not just, flight or fight or, tactical response like we all live in every day. So I'm sitting on a train in Switzerland, my chin on my hand. I'm just looking out at the Alps, and it was like literally a cosmic brain dump. This information just started coming into my head. How's technology going to impact real estate? So I asked my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, I said, do you have anything to write with? And she gave me one of those the little tablet pads you got when you were in grade school. And I just started like manically writing, and I filled it up. And then it took me from 89 to 1992 to write it. It was called The Information Age and the Potential Impacts on How We Use Real Estate. I think I sent it to you. And if I haven't, I will. But in that, it predicted, the rise of Netflix, the demise of Eastman Kodak, the rise of digital cameras. But ultimately, what did that mean to real estate? So that was 92. So it was 33 years ago, right? Somebody in the real estate industry would have read that document. By the time COVID hit, we would have been ready for it. We would have transformed into digital workplaces, smaller spaces, more effective. It took the real estate industry a pandemic to realize that it was only utilizing 30 to 35% of its space. Okay. So the information was out there. Now, whether or not they believe me, maybe I wasn't credible. I didn't have a big enough podium, but the information was out there. And I used to do speeches all over the country on it. And so it's not like I didn't try. They read it, but they probably, and this is the question I ask my friends, like, okay, so we have a new piece of information now. It's called AI. Cloud was the same way. I developed a cloud software platform in 1999, and I still have people in my industry who will be at Realcomm 2025. We're saying, Jim, should I take this app to the cloud? And it's like, no, because we're getting ready to leave the cloud and go back to distributed computing. That's a whole nother story for a different day. Okay, that's 5-10 years in the future. But in any event, we went through it with cloud, and now with AI, I'm seeing the same thing. You can go to the NVIDIA conference. I'm sure you can watch it online, 2 minutes and I think 2 hours and 21 minutes, 2 hours and 11 minutes. It's out on YouTube. Any real estate professional, tech or senior level can go watch that. And you can see the future, like I showed the future in 1992. It's what you choose to do with that information that's critical. And I'm telling you, real estate organizations don't have another 32 years to figure it out. AI is going to change every process, everything that goes on in a building, from turning heat down to doing a maintenance request and paying your bills. And so the question is that I have after 30 to 35 years trying to bridge these two industries, real estate and technology, oil and vinegar, make a nice Italian salad. But what happens, sometimes they don't mix, right? Or they don't mix well enough. And to me, that's the question I have after all this time is, why does it take our industry so much time to believe that this technology is going to impact their buildings? And All you got to do is look at the office market right now. You probably got at least 50% of our stock that was built in the 80s fundamentally, functionally obsolete. And they're converting them to apartments and whatever else they can find, but the cost, they weren't designed to convert to apartments. So again, it's not the technology, it's how our industry deciphers information, identifies the information, believes or doesn't believe the information, and then acts on it. And the Realcomm, IBcon, crowds, they lean in, they're the tip of the spear. But if you go to a typical real estate meeting in any town USA, they're still talking about ChatGPT and how fun it is, and they got to dig deeper. They got to dig much deeper.
On the specific point of the office conversions, I remember in 2020, I brought up in a meeting, and there were probably 60 of us in this meeting. It was all virtual. And they were talking about office, and because remember, like this started happening in 2020, like this all the talk about the distressed office space. And I remember saying like, well, and I understand the management. I know like, the core and how it's not built and the codes are different. I understand all that. But when I said that, they were like, no, that's too complicated. It's too expensive and this and that. And I'm like, but you're facing a problem that's so big that they better do something. They don't want to hear.
It actually started well before COVID. Okay. It started with the advent of the laptop computer. Okay. I think Wang Laboratories came out with its laptop in 83, 84. All of a sudden, and then there was the IBM sewing machine and the compact, right? So there were all these early iterations of a laptop. And what a laptop meant is I didn't need to be at a desk. And I remember early in my career being in New York City and traveling with alligator clips, because I would take my 2400 baud modem in my laptop and undo the phone and click it in and check email. I was the nut. I was the guy doing that, right? But once the laptop came about, and then ultimately it turned into phones, right? Now we got computers in our hands. You really started to learn that you could do anything, anywhere, from a work standpoint. And don't get me wrong, there's still plenty of reasons for humans to be together in rooms, collaborating, sharing. So I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't be together in offices, but that office needed to change. So by the mid 2015s, it was very clear to me that utilization in an office building was way under what people were thinking. We did an event at Microsoft's headquarters, I believe it was 2015, 2016. And I said, all right, all you corporate real estate guys who run the biggest corporate campuses in the country, what's your utilization rate? How much of the space do you use at any given time? Well, I got salespeople on the roads. I got consultants on the road, Mary's and, pregnancy leave. I mean, take a guess in 2015, 2016, what number did we settle on that they agreed they were utilizing their office space? Take a guess.
Oh man, I have no idea that they were
throw a dart.
75.
First time in my career, I could get a room full of corporate real estate executives to agree that 2/3 of their buildings were empty on any day of the week.
Wow.
And I said, you do understand what I'm saying? I'm saying you're only using 35 and 65%. And they're like, yeah, that was 2015. So it was already happening, but nobody wanted to believe it. Right. And so you think about, let's keep building more. Let's keep building more. 2018, prices are at the top. Everybody's relevering all the buildings, getting more debt. The world's going to keep up. And it continued through the pandemic. I mean, even people in the real estate industry that were living on team calls and Zoom calls didn't think that, and so, yes, we're back to work. New York is back to work. People are coming to the office. Occasionally when you need to work remote or you're on the road, what I believe in is flex, meaning you need to take a look at your office space and the flexibility that your employees are looking for, and you come up with a combined strategy. But mandating that people be 2-hour commutes every day to come in, what's going to happen in the long run? You're just going to lose good people, right?
Yeah. This
is 2025. George Jetson was doing it, in the 70s on his video conferencing, device, so then when the pandemic hit, it was like throwing gasoline on the fire. So 35% pre-pandemic, I estimated on a 7-day week, 24-hour day, because you're paying insurance, paying bills, that it was only about 8%, 9% utilization. So you spend all this money to build these buildings. Don't know why that's happening.
But that was cool though.
Yeah,
Whatever. Yeah, that was cool though. I liked it.
I fully understand that.
So for those listening, a bunch of Jim put his hand up, and then a bunch of balloons flew over the screen. So that was perfect.
So by the time the pandemic came around, and here's the most ironic part. And half of the Realcomm story is smart buildings. During the pandemic, with those buildings basically empty for 24 months, the energy consumption associated with those buildings in New York City did not go down an inch. They were required to keep those buildings operating to a point where it could be habitable by a tenant. So they were air conditioning and heating those buildings for 2 years when they were virtually empty. So it's failure to recognize the transition of how people work. It's failure to implement technologies in a building that allow you to turn the AC off when nobody's in the room. So here it is, 30 years after I started my journey, that the pandemic showed how under-equipped we were and how our real estate thinking is very antiquated. Very antiquated.
So even these, that blows my mind that in 2015 it was 36% or 35%. That is
35. We were in the executive briefing center of Microsoft headquarters up in the Seattle area.
Man.
Yep.
But also all of these challenges, there are solutions, creative technology-based solutions to find that. So that's to me, going back to the distressed office, like there's a way to look at this and get the data and figure out. And now what you're saying with architects, like, okay, yeah, it's too expensive, it's too costly, but if you have the right processes and the right people and the right to use this to get the construction costs down, to get the process dialed in, like you can lessen the blow to some sort and eventually make something that's profitable.
So in my world, if I'm going to do a project and I'm interviewing architects, my question is, I want to do a real-time, live session with you, a visualization session, conceptual visualization on what I got in my head. I don't want to tell you and then you go away and do something and bring me back a few drawings. I want you to have such good AI skills that we can do this live. I want a 3-story. I mean, I've seen the demos in the last 30 days. I'll draw it out on a napkin, and in 30 seconds, that napkin is turned into a 3D building, and I can start moving walls. Okay, so I know it's possible. So I go into my architect and I say, I want a real-time strategy session. They're going to 9 out of 10 are going to say, what? So I guess, so tell me how hard it's going to be to find that 1 out of 10 who's really got the skills to be able to do that. They're going to be the survivors. They're going to define the new standards for the architectural and design industry. And it's going to be that way along every process. So here's the question I have for you or for anybody who's listening. So we watched Blockbuster Video compete with Amazon or with Netflix. We watched the online book sales compete with the traditional in-store retailers. And somebody once shared this story with me. So Jim, you got 2 companies. You got Amazon and you got one of the big bookstores. 90% of the employees every day go into that traditional bookseller, figuring out how tall the shelves should be, where to place the books in front of the store. 90%. And then they got this little annoying 10% who's trying to figure out selling books online. Who do you think wins? Okay. Amazon, 110% of the people coming into those buildings, they're not worrying about shelves or carpet or the size of the store. They're worrying about how to make the online buying decision. And then how do you correlate that or relate that to the real estate industry? My question is, can somebody with 100 million square foot portfolio, hundreds and thousands of buildings, in a race, they have to play a lot of off defense in the next 5 to 10 years, right? They have to undo all the things they haven't done for the last 20 years. Convert the space to an apartment building, put in systems that make the building smart so you can regulate them and manage them better. Or is there going to be some little real estate company that pops up and starts out with no portfolio, no legacy, and they will be a technology, AI kind of centric company. And every step along the way is technology first. How do we design it? How do we find our land? How do we build it? this guy who's going to speak in our general session, I think he's got 16 different robot companies they've evaluated in order to work on this new project. He's 3D printing furniture for his headquarters. He's not buying any furniture from traditional people who manufacture in China and send it over on a boat. He's going to take little pellets and he's going to print a chair, a desk, and a shelf. And he's going to have a video. We're going to show a video of it. And then when he's done with that furniture, when the styles change, he's going to grind it up and print something else. Have you eever heard of a real estate guy that innovative?
No.
He's going to have no.
I got to meet this guy. Jim.
Yeah, he'll be there. They're going to have very few, if any, AC outlets in a corporate headquarters, 250,000 square feet. Yeah, listen to what I just said. No 110 outlets. He's going with a DC architecture. High voltage FMP, fault managed power, and then low voltage for your laptop that you're on right now is low voltage. Probably the light that you're using to light you for this podcast is low voltage. The screen you're looking at to your right is low voltage. Your toaster could be low voltage. Your blender could be low voltage. It's all native low voltage, and then we convert it to DAC, which that's another 20-year journey that we could probably do a whole podcast on. But so my point is, when you look pragmatically at the real estate industry and the speed that they can operate as it relates to technology and innovation, can these big companies do what I call transformational innovation? And the jury's still out.
Before we take off here, and thank you again. You've been very gracious with your time and your knowledge and your experience. Do you and you've done very well for yourself, like who you are and what you've done with your conference and how you've grown. So congratulations. But how do you deal with the frustration? Because maybe like as you're going along, like you're picking winners and you're like you see what's happening and that's a big part of like your skill set. But because like there's still this gap between technology and commercial real estate, how do you deal with the frustration when you're like tell people and like you're winning and the people you're seeing you're winning, but a lot of people just aren't catching on. Like how do you deal with it?
Yeah, that's a very intuitive question. And honestly, there's sometimes I just have to trick myself, right? And convince myself because I've been passionate about the strategic implications of this transformation for over 30 years, right? And one of the methods I approached was, okay, I'm just going to start a company. You guys don't believe me, the cloud's going to make it in 1999. I'm going to start a company. I sold it to LoopNet. They sold it to CoStar. Okay, so I didn't make the money that they make today on stupid ideas, but I'll take my little win. The other thing that keeps me sane is I deal with really smart, passionate people. So even if there are only 3 people in the real estate organization that get it, I'm dealing with those 3 people. And we work together to try to reshape the bigger organization when they go back from a conference. So you deal with a lot of people who are equally as passionate. But I will tell you that I do think it is time that I either myself probably or just work with people who are ready to rethink what a real estate company, commercial real estate company looks like. And I think right alongside the education and the collaboration and the information sharing, the Realcomm and IBcon and all our other events, I think you need to just do it and find people who will get in a room and look at the process from the start to the finish, from the first shovel, or actually the first pen on napkin, to the first shovel, to the disposition of the asset 15 years later. And it doesn't even have to be big. It doesn't have to be, world changing, but I think it would be very interesting to try to see how that real estate company could compete with these other, big, long traditional companies that just have too many processes and things that they're going to have to play defense on. I just don't think that they're going to be able to move as fast. And if they are moving fast, they're in our community, right? They will be at Realcomm and IBcon in Savannah in 4 weeks.
Okay, so here's I wanted to make sure we did this. We talked about the conference, and I'm ecstatic. I'm buying my my plane ticket today. Can you say a little bit about the conference, when it is, where it is, how they can join? And I'll make sure to get this podcast episode out as soon as possible.
Well, people are always, they've got limitations on their time and their budgets as it relates to getting smart about this kind of stuff. I've been a little frustrated with our industry that there's too many shiny new object conferences out there where they go, just get somebody on the stage that's got a name and a reputation. They talk very high level and they go an inch deep and a mile wide. So you get a lot of the early people, the people get excited, the shiny new object people. But the minute you start asking them hard questions, like we talked about earlier, like where does this fit into the enterprise? What's your API strategy? Where's your cyber statements? They just run for cover, right? So when you come to Realcomm and IBcon, you're going to work, and we're going to talk about the hard things. A lot of people don't like that. Oh yeah, we're going to put this technology in. It's going to change the world. Well, go back and change the organization. Go back and get rid of all your old equipment. Well, go back and get the budget for this. We talk about the real things, right? And I've been told, that out of all the other events out there that we're considered the gold standard, right? That, I have probably spent 60 hours curating the AI conversations that will be on our stage. Not just throw Bob up there from service provider XYZ because he's got a big company and a big name, and let him throw some PowerPoint slides up there. 60 hours have gone into what topics are we going to talk about? Who's going to be the ones talking about them? Who's going to do the demos that will show how far off we're? And frankly, there's no guarantee that we're going to hit a home run, but I'll guarantee you any organization who puts time to curate conversations versus just throwing people on stage, hopefully the results are better. So Savannah, Georgia, we picked Savannah because it's a secondary city. Costs are lower for us, so costs should be lower for the people attending. We know people are budget conscious these days. And then the convention center, it's a brand new convention center. They got all the technology we need. I can't tell you the trouble we have going to Las Vegas when we do our events and trying to get the Wi-Fi to work in some of the biggest hotels you've been to in Las Vegas. They want to charge us 4 times as much and the technology doesn't work. Well, we get tired of that, right? So now we found this convention center in Savannah that's got gigabit Ethernet, and everybody should have a wonderful time when it comes to Wi-Fi. So 250 speakers, 130, 140 exhibitors, the big, massive companies, Yardi MRIs, VTSs, Altus, all the consulting companies, all the smart building companies, the Siemens, the Johnsons, the Tridiums. But then we got the mid-sized companies who started 15 years ago, are making good names for themselves. And then we're going to have, 2-3 dozen startups. So we got the startups that are willing to jump on an airplane and go try to convince people that what they've got is good. So the exhibit floor is out of control. And the program, I know how hard Howard and Sarah and team work. I know how hard I've been working on trying to make sure we get the right people up there. There's no place on the planet. Honestly, challenge me. Bring somebody from another event on. I'd love to have a debate about why ours is better. And I'm talking the world. I mean, I follow events. The only place I'm not so sure of is China, because they're moving it. We should do an episode on China because they're 5, 7, 10 years ahead of us in so many.
Well, you mentioned that. Do an episode, Jim. Anytime, we talk about all this stuff. This is what I really enjoy spending time with. I think I've smiled more at this episode than the other ones.
What's important to your generation is you find guys like me who are coming to the end of our careers, right? And I can help you avoid disasters because I've seen them 3-4 times. Yeah. And as long as you believe us, this collective baby boomer generation that's been spending 25, 30 years trying to get smart buildings going, trying to get people to the cloud, trying to get them to understand AI. If you just sit and listen a little bit, I swear to you, we can help you avoid major mistakes by 2 to 3 years. Don't go down that path. We've gone down that path. It doesn't work, whether it's budgeting or how you implement a tech strategy or how you look at data or where your cyber strategy is. There's best practices out there for a lot of these. And those people come to the conference. They're all the ones with gray hair like mine, but they want to share. They want to share it with your generation. We don't want you to have to start from scratch. And so, there's a lot. The bigger problem, we've had good careers. We've, done okay. But, as you get closer to the end of a career, you want to share and help the next folks coming behind you. Every one of the people I work with, no matter how big the companies they are, want to help and share. I mean, we have a group we've kind of brought into our community called Stacks and Jewels. These guys are wonderful guys helping financially challenged individuals in not good neighborhoods all over, specifically in New York right now. And we get them in and we teach them building automation skills and show them how to make $65,000, $70,000 a year, right? We want to help. But a lot of people in the younger generation, I'm going to be frank with you, they think they have all the answers. They don't want to ask us questions. And they basically say, we got it. That is a horrific, terrible mistake. We don't think we know it all. We don't want to push things in your face, but we do have something called experience. And that can help their journeys accelerate, whether you're on the tech side or the real estate side. The community that's been around for 25, 30 years wants to share.
Yeah. And so also what I'd say, you alluded to this before about people just trying, like use AI and like be curious, ask people, but learn. And, you got to do it. You have to actually see what it can do. And that always, especially for me, it always sparks something else like, oh, maybe it can work like this. And what other challenges are similar to this? And you have to do that.
You would think a real estate person out of all the different professions would be interested in this conversation. Somebody said something to me when we were talking about digital employees and what we're going to show at the conference. They said, Jim, do you realize that the desk will no longer be in the Fifth Avenue office building? The desk, the employee, will be in the server in Utah. That accounting person, that HR person that takes the bus into Manhattan or the train into Manhattan and goes up to the 15th floor and gets their coffee and sits there. I mean, you think we've seen productivity shifts from humans to machines in the last 20 years. Every organization is going to have some kind of a digital employee in the next 24 months. But that impacts the space. Now we're leaving the tactical realm of how can I use this to collect my rents better? But how about those C-suite guys who should be thinking, is this going to further diminish the kind of office space that people are going to need? And what does the office of the future look like? Does it have cube farms and desks? So it's got a coffee bar. Okay, guys, get over it. People who want to do are going to be expected to do business over the next 10, 15 years. They're going to need new tools. They're going to need new ways of communicating. And if your offices or your collaboration facilities offer the best that the 80s had to offer, no.
Wow, that was fun. Jim,
there's a lot to cover.
Yeah. There's a lot to cover. And so I'll put the conference and your website in the show notes. But as we prepare to close this down, is there any last parting words for this episode?
Yeah. I think that we had a lot to unpack, but I think the one word that you said that is really at the center of this is curiosity. And I think because so many people just got head down and on their phones and, doing silly stuff, that they've lost the fundamental, attribute of curiosity. And what does curiosity do? Just don't rely what you're seeing on your feed. Digital buildings, DC power, AI for real estate. Go looking for some of this stuff, right? And then sit in rooms with some peers and go, okay, how does this impact our business? The business models that we've all come to get used to over the last 35 to 40 years, they're all going to get disrupted. And if you aren't curious, then you will see your business model erode. And we've got, what did I say, 50% at least of all our Class A office buildings are functionally obsolete. Some problems need to be solved, and I think you ought to put a little curiosity in a bottle and shake it on it, because we need some creative minds to figure out what to do with all this dysfunctional or functionally obsolete real estate.
Yeah. Well, I'm very excited to be at the conference and see all of these creatives and these people actually putting their money where their mouth is. So.
And I heard we're putting you to work. Hopefully, did you get the email? You're going to do some podcasts for us?
I didn't get that message, but I'm ready for service.
Your name's on a list. As soon as we hang up, I'm going to make sure that the person managing this, in fact, I'll take a picture of our podcast. I'll send it to him, saying you need 2 or 3 slots. We set up a big LED wall. We got very professional looking set where I think we do about 30 to 40 podcasts. We're looking for hosts. You're such a natural at it. I'm going to tell them to work.
Thank you, Jim. And ready for service. But again, Jim Young, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great time.